Filmmaking and Cinematography Podcast.
What's up guys, I'm Alex and welcome back to another episode of the Filmmaking and Cinematography Podcast. Today we're diving into something every solo filmmaker needs to master, balancing the roles of writer, director and cinematographer. If you ever try to do it all yourself, crafting the story while also printing your shots, you know it's not easy, but trust me, it's also one of the most rewarding parts of filmmaking. So in this episode, I'm going to show you how to manage these roles seamlessly, crafting a cohesive vision for your film while saving time and energy. Let's start with the story. Everything begins with the story. It doesn't matter if you have the best cameras, the coolest transitions, or the best cinematography. If your story doesn't work, your project will fall flat. But here's where being both the writer and the director gives you an edge. As you write, you can already start visualizing how the scenes will look on the big screen. For example, say you're writing a scene where your character walks into a dimly lit room. Instead of just focusing on what the character says or does, stop for a second and ask yourself, how do I want this to look? Should the camera slowly push in to create tension? Should we see the room through the eyes with a POV shot? Or maybe we want to keep the camera still, letting the uneasiness come from the silence. Or maybe how to light the scene. Do we need some key light, some backlight? Are we going to use just practical lights? There's always something to think about just when writing the scene. Here's something I would do. As I would write, I keep a notebook or a separate file open where I jot down quick visual ideas. It's not a full storyboard, of course. It's just notes like wide shot of the room, overhead shot of the table, or long angle to emphasize tension. These ideas don't have to be perfect, but they give me a starting point for pre-production. Also, sometimes, as an interesting fact, I even start from the other way around. I sometimes have a random idea of some really cool cinematic shots. I know how to do the lighting and how to do everything, but now I need to figure out some story that could fit that shot. And of course, both ways are interesting ways, and because you are both the writer, the director, the DP and everything, then you have the full freedom to do so. Every film has a visual language, even if you're not consciously thinking about it. As a filmmaker, you need to decide what yours will be. Is your story dark and moody? Then you're probably looking at a high contrast lighting, lots of shadows, maybe even a cooler color palette. If your story is light-headed, you might go for natural light, vibrant colors and playful camera movement. One of my favorite style personal is some combination of very smooth movement and of course together with sometimes even just basic static shots and let just the composition tell the story. And coming back to the basic idea of writing the story, I usually even have some ideas starting from a simple composition. Coming back to the idea of that I told before about the dark room, let's say there is a lonely man and a table. We could put the lonely man sitting just on one side of the table and leave a lot of empty space, and then the story can continue with that on, but we can have just a simple static shot. But what's amazing about doing this while you write is that you already have a starting point to direct the film. You're not just coming up with dialogue or actions, you're deciding how the audience will experience them visually. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine you're writing a scene where two characters are having an intense argument. Instead of just writing dialogue and leaving the visuals for later, think about how you want to shoot the scene. Maybe you start with a wide shot showing both characters in the same frame. Then, as the argument escalates, you cut to tighter close-ups, making the audience feel the intensity of the confrontation. Or maybe you use a single handheld shot, following the characters as they move around the room, making the scene feel raw and chaotic. Or maybe, even more interesting, you can play around with weird framing, for example putting the characters really tight to the edge with a lot of empty space behind them, showing insecurity. By thinking about this while you write, you're not just making the story better, you're making your job easier when you get to the set. Now let's talk about the shot list and blocking. Once you get the story written, it's time to get a bit more technical. A shot list is the best friend here. Even if it's just a simple list, with things like establishing wide shot, close up on hands, or medium shots on the character, it will keep you organized and ensure you don't miss any important coverage. Blocking is another big one. As you visualize your scene, think about how the actors will move within the frame. Are they walking towards the camera? Are they sitting down in a silhouette? This decision can add so much to your storytelling without adding extra cost or complexity, and the best thing is that you do everything, and you need to use and utilize this as your advantage, and do not think about finding other people. Sometimes even just being a solo filmmaker might be the key to achieving your best movie ever. Now finally, let's talk about the mindset of being an all-in-one filmmaker. It's not easy, but it's one of the most rewarding ways to work. When you're the writer, director and DP, you have total creative control. You don't have to explain your vision to anyone else. You already know what you want. But here's the catch, you need to stay organized. One way to do this is by combining your writing and the pre-production process. Don't separate them. Let them feed into each other. Write, visualize and plan all at once. Also, think like an editor. As you write, ask yourself, does this scene flow naturally into the next one? Do I have enough coverage to tell the story visually? Will I need extra shots to make the transition smoother? Thinking this way will save you much more time in post-production. And remember, the whole idea is to embrace constraints, limited budget, minimal gear. That's okay, no worry. Some of the most creative solutions come from working within limits, instead of seeing them as obstacles. See them as opportunities to think outside the box. But keep in mind, this is a mistake that I've done it before, and I wish I haven't done it, so hear me out. This filming solo, so as a solo filmmaker, is not an excuse for not trying out to put your vision out there into the world, because after working a lot of time alone, then when coming together with people, then it's time to explain your vision, and it's time to separate the roles, because okay, if you're doing everything alone, then you have the creative freedom, but you can't be good at everything. You cannot be as good as a cinematographer as you can be an editor and director and producer and so everything all at once. So that's why there are many roles in filmmaking, that's why there are many people involved in filmmaking. So this is not an excuse to work 100% alone, it's to embrace the closure that you are working alone, and that's amazing to create a movie as a solo filmmaker, and as said, it gives you the full creative freedom, but the most important thing is that it's not an excuse to not work with other people. And even if you're a solo filmmaker, it's best to try out to explain your vision. So even to your actors or to family members, friends who just understand your vision, then please explain it to them, because you need to understand your idea much better. The best way to understand something is if you can explain it. And if you explain it clear enough, then you understand it clear enough. And that's the idea for when even as a solo filmmaker or as a filmmaker that works together with other people, it's very important to understand your vision and to get it clearly out. Alright, so to sum it all up, writing and directing at the same time isn't just possible, it's a true superpower. But just remember to use it wisely, to also explain your vision, to have the exercise, so then when you're working with multiple people together, then you know how to clearly explain your vision and even to get it better as a solo filmmaker. It allows you to create a film that feels cohesive, personal and uniquely yours. By visualizing your shots as you write, you're not just telling a story, you're creating a cinematic experience. So, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Filmmaking and Cinematography Podcast. I hope you found these tips useful, and I can't wait to see what you create. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to tell other fellow filmmakers. This would help me a lot. I'm Alex Sofonea, and until next time, keep creating, keep experimenting, and keep telling stories that matter. See you soon.